Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the third podcast that we're doing with Steve Clifford. The other podcast should be in our podcast library. This particular one, we've got a focus on implementing SAP successfully by planning. This is not just project planning. This is planning the organization or planning within the organization to start bringing in SAP and start delivering SAP. So why don't I go over to Stephen? Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Hi. I'm Steve Clifford. I'm ex-PwC. I've been working for myself for over 20 years. I've been around SAP most of that time. And I focus on helping clients, usually when they have a problem midway through their implementation of SAP. It's nice to do it properly from the outset, but I usually get brought in as a turnaround type program manager, program director, to help clients, and that's what I enjoy doing.
No, thank you. I think just for people that have not listened to the very first podcast that we did with Stephen, which is about what you do if you think your SAP program is off track, but the status reports show green. In that particular one, we also explain how Stephen can go in and be an independent person who reviews your current status within SAP and SAP delivery. So it doesn't necessarily have to go into full recovery. It could just be a status check. And I think if you've not listened to that podcast, you should, because it shows how non-invasive it is and how much that can add value. With regard to this one, so let's talk about planning. And let's talk about if a business wants to implement a new ERP system, there's some work that's been done beforehand before they choose someone like SAP. So I guess some of this advice is generic across multiple ERPs, but it's not one day that they wake up and go, yep, I'm going to go for SAP or I'm going to go for Oracle, and then there's an allocation of 50 million quid or whatever it is. This thing, it takes a lot of thinking about, and it takes a lot of planning, and there's a lot of stuff you can do before you make that decision. Where do they start?
My advice is always to bring somebody in who's been there, seen there, and done it. And I know somebody who's done just that. And the area that I tend to try and focus on is planning. So, failing to plan, planning to fail. Believe you me, it's sad, but I see turnarounds. I see programs that have got problems. Their SAP programs not going very well, and I've turned around quite a few of them. But it is quite sad to see that the one thing that usually is missing is the plan, which is quite shocking. And if it's been led by a good team of external SI partners, they tend to have very good 50,000 feet view slides of the plan. If you ask to see the plan, as I would, going in to do a review for somebody, they would have a couple of PowerPoint slides that were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But when you ask to see the plan below that, the detail, the substance over form, it's often not there. And I just think it weaves its way all the way through all the stages, planning and preparation, all the way through testing, training, cut over, go live. You need to have a plan, a detailed plan, and you need a plan that utilizing Activate as a methodology, but going much more in more depth than that. So Activate is SAP's offering. But using that as a strap line, then decomposing into a Microsoft project plan, a lot more detail, a lot more planning and preparation activities, and a lot more. So go live is all very well, but what about go stable, as I call it? It's my own sort of title. It's going live, but what happens when you go live? A client the other day they went live with a Big Four partner a couple of years ago, and they lost 4 weeks of production globally across 40 countries. Clearly, their plan was not good enough. So I've done this multiple times. We build a plan with the client. You engage all parties, IT, all the business, everybody in the plan, the external SI partner. They may not be there at that time, but you obviously bring them in when you selected them. So everybody knows what the plan is. There's no secrecy around it, and it has to have masses of detail. It has to have people who know what tasks come before what the critical interdependencies are. And it's only then you'll find your critical path. And planning to the nth degree of detail is really important, but not just producing the plan and then letting it die on the vine there and then. You build the plan, you engage people in doing that. Everybody starts to understand other teams' role in the program. Then having a planning process, you use the plan, you monitor against the plan, and you adapt it as you go through the program. And that's the key to success, quite frankly, because it helps people come together. It makes sure that there's no risks and issues that you've not captured, because they sort of come out when you review the plan each week. You have a planning review session, and then you can start to do things like the client I was talking to last week didn't have. Well, what's your business continuity plan going to look like? Your cutover plan? How are you going to return to normal levels of business, manufacturing, whatever, as quickly as you go live? 4 weeks without production was clearly, disaster.
I can't imagine how much that costs.
Yeah, tens of millions. But there are others. I mean, there was another turnaround for a major UK drinks company that I looked at a few years ago, and we turned it round, and we did a 90-day after go live. We monitor for a period of time, day by day, what are the issues. So what I call ripples. Look out for the ripples. What's happening in the business that looks like a ripple? Because it could be a tsunami that's coming your way. If there's a ripple, find out what it is, fix the issue as you go forward. So you go live to go stable. How do you get manufacturing, goods received, goods dispatched, payments, cash dispersed, and all those levels of activity back to normal as quick as possible? And you can only have that by having a brilliant plan and a great team that is engaged in it, and a process.
No, thank you. I think that makes sense in probably everything, in terms of you plan well, and the rest of it is easier for sure. But if let's say I'm a CFO, it's a £1 billion business, they're implementing SAP at the moment, and I asked to look at the plan. Well, I don't know, because I've not done this before. I don't know what a good plan looks like. So first of all, what could be happening in the business for me to think this plan's not right?
I can remember looking. I asked to see the plan. Big Four partner was currently in with a client. I went in to do a review. I asked to see the program plan, and the go live was staggered over four different dates. And all they had was two slides. They were very pretty. They were beautiful, in fact, but they had no Microsoft project plan, which is what I wanted to see. And this was across the Middle East. This is a Big Four partner. Go live was scheduled to take place during Ramadan.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Need I say any more?
Yeah.
When I took over a UK-based, it's a global client, one of the biggest, a failed implementation a few years ago, we planned massive detail. And I remember walking into the boardroom, and you mentioned the CFO. The CFO was sitting as I was putting up this Microsoft project plan, and it was about 25 feet wide and 6 feet deep. And I put it up all around the boardroom to illustrate. And his words were, "Steve, we haven't had that before." And I said, "Greatest respect, that's why you failed." That's why your last go live collapsed and failed. There was no plan. So this is what we're doing. Is it perfect? No. But we will build this. We will walk through this process. We will continue to plan as we go through the project, and people will be engaged in it. Some reluctantly, but we'll do it anyway, because and there is not one project that I've looked at in the last 10 years. If I've been there from the outset, it's part of my modus operandi. But if I've gone into a project that's got, and it's usually because there's a problem or it's in the toilet, I can honestly say it's because they don't have a plan, or it isn't worth the paper it's written on. And you just got to do it.
And can plans be independently verified? Like, can the CFO is a little concerned that perhaps the plan is not robust enough? And I guess, if you're a CFO of £1 billion business, you're going to have a good gut feel. So you're going to know if that plan's not good enough. Can they have that independently tested, independently checked?
Sure. Yeah. I've worked with, the client I'm talking about here had its own risk and governance group, and I invited them along to see what we were doing, and they absolutely loved it. And they would come through. We would go through with the audit team as well, the internal audit team and the external audit team, showing our thinking. And the more people you get involved in this, the more feedback you get. And sometimes you can get nuggets of wisdom that you can build into the plan. I try and understand the culture of the client when I first go there, and what is their business calendar. So January to December, what's unique about this client? What is it you do? Is it building? Is it making and stocking up Easter eggs before Easter and Christmas if you're a chocolate manufacturer? Whatever. Or if it's a Formula One team, I can think of. Is there a race calendar holiday, which there happens to be in the middle of July, I believe? Those sorts of unique things. Well, what are the things? And you can then build that into your plan. You actually show the client you understand what you're doing. If you're a big four and you build a plan, which is just 2 slides, doesn't matter how beautiful they are. If you've got go live staggered across Ramadan, I'm sorry, that's just unforgivable. And that's not a one-off. I see it all the time, and associates as well. Get people involved. Some people hate planning, and that's fine. I understand that. So it's like dance classes. Sometimes there's a reluctant dance partner, but you're coming along anyway.
It's very
it's
true.
Fun.
Very true.
It's a fun activity at the end of the day, believe it or not.
For some.
But
for some. I think in that situation, then, as the CFO, I think what I'd probably do is ask some internal people, like from internal audit or from governance risk departments, to come and cast their eye over it and just see what they think. And I think what you'll probably get in that situation is you'll probably get confirmation that your gut feel telling you that it was a bit of a problem is probably going to manifest into it actually being a problem. But maybe you catch it early and before it becomes a business problem or a program problem. But I think ultimately, if you're not quite sure or you've got some doubts about the plan, they can come out to someone like us and get that independently checked. It's non-destructive. And what it allows is, let's say the plan is brilliant, and therefore, the client is now thinking, well, okay, yep, great, let's continue as normal. They're still going to learn something from that. One is, don't worry so much. Yep. And then the second one is, as the plan's being checked, I'm sure you're going to deliver some words of wisdom, some killer questions that they should be asking in program board meetings and things like that just arm them up with enough questions so they can get very comfortable with what might be a great program.
Yep, absolutely.
There's no downside.
Yep, absolutely. Getting those people on side is really important. You do bounce off each other with good ideas, and I can think of an example that the classic, certainly with finance, is financial year end. You're going live in finance. Why would you go live halfway through a financial year, because you've got
Yeah.
balances in the old system, balances in SAP. I can't think of a worse time to go live in finance, but I can tell you there's one huge client that is planning to do so. They're 2 years late doing it. They're still planning to go live halfway through a financial year, which is cloud
Wow.
cuckoo land thinking. Greatest respect.
Yeah.
That sort of challenge, and you try aggregating old data sets with new data sets in a financial year. I'm not sure how the city would react to it. I think probably pretty negatively. But
Very
things
true.
like that, the risk people and that, they're very useful allies, and good ideas both ways. It's important.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes that common sense approach and also that, being able to ask the stupid question type of thing is something that an external can do really easily because they're impartial. So they're going to look at something just cold. And that is, let's look at the business trading plan for the year. Let's look at what the SAP program delivery plan is for the year. Why the hell are we going live in Ramadan? That just doesn't make sense. And then
That
yeah,
was
and
I wish I could say who it was because
no, don't,
no,
don't.
so but
But I
that's not
think
uncommon, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Going live halfway through your financial year. I mean, there was another client. Always be very careful that you're looking when you're planning. So as you're running these programs, always be try and understand what else is going across the company, which is usually a global entity, and there are other initiatives going on, be they HR or sales sponsored, whatever. But there are things that can impact you at the last minute. One client, we found out that they wanted to change all the bank accounts 3 weeks before we went live, and we were all over it. So we were able to basically say, no way, go away.
yeah,
And it comes back to planning. Planning, if there's one milestone on a project, and there should be many, there's one milestone which is absolutely key. It's called design freeze. And it happens very
what
early
is
on.
that?
You do your design, you have your arguments and discussions, and you finally come up with a design. Design freeze. That means no changes. I can't tell you how many people want to change design halfway through, but 3 weeks before you go live, changing all the bank accounts was likely to have been a disaster. We were all over it. We were aware of it, so we were able to have an off-site powwow over that and deal with it. But if you didn't have that process in place, it could have been a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in terms of the planning, if the client is just thinking about upgrading or thinking about a new instance of let's say SAP or I guess any ERP, when does the planning process start? Is it as they're thinking about, even before vendor selection, even before SI selection?
Yeah.
That's when the plan needs to be started. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The earlier the better. The earlier the better. 50,000 feet is great to start with, and you can eliminate some thoughts and ideas around options and challenges and what's happening in the business. There may be market sensitivity around mergers, acquisitions going on downstream. You need to know about those things within reason, but planning cannot start too soon, and it continues ad infinitum. It doesn't just you don't just produce a plan and then it dies. You continue the planning process. There's a danger then that you might all be joined up, that you all know where you are and where you're going.
And some might say at the end of it, oh my goodness, that was easy. that huge ERP implementation, that was easy.
What is a good go live? A good go live is boredom. Boring. I had a VP for Samsonite come to me the day we went live in Asia Pacific. That was about 10 countries. We went live, big bang across all those countries. He came to me halfway through the morning, said, "We're live, Steve. Is that it?" I said, "Yeah. Don't speak too loud. That's it." He said, "But there's nothing. There's nothing going on. There's no." I said, "That's what we want."
That's very true, actually. And I think if you speak to anyone, whether it's ERP implementation, right down to anything, even if you sit down and speak to tradesmen, they'll say planning, plan this right, And I like what you said before about making sure that the plan is started even as you start to think about an ERP. I think if I was a client, CFO, CEO, and I'm signing off on something like this for this kind of investment, if I've got a recommendation there that says we should go with this vendor, my next question should be, show me the plan that's got you to that decision, and then show me how that will be executed in theory right now before we say yes. Yep. And then that way that plan's been done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
The SAS have a wonderful 7 Ps principle, which I adhere to. Proper prior planning prevents something poor performance.
Yes. Yeah. And it's true, isn't it? Yep. I wonder why it goes out the window when you come to doing something like an ERP implementation. Could it be that, if you bring in a large consultancy, you bring in an SA partner, there's this element of it's okay, they've got this type of thing. Maybe it's an element of that in it.
The plans don't exist. They're never done to the degree necessary. People don't understand it. Very few people enjoy it. I do. I'm weird. I enjoy planning. They just don't, honestly, they just don't exist. And it's almost, therefore, trust me, I'm a consultant. We've got this partner, so it'll be all right. And it isn't. It's never, So there should be no shock horrors at all. It should be. I'm not saying we don't change the plan through the program. They tend to be minor tweaks. If you captured it all effectively, and you built in the logical linkages, and you've got to have been doing this job for 25 years before you know what those linkages are and what the critical path's likely to be. There's no radical change necessary.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe a lot of clients thinking on the lines of, we've got this business case. Now, show me the business case. Show me how you've got to that recommendation is a very valid question, and one that we hear all the time. But I don't hear very often is, now show me the plan attached to that. I don't hear that very often, and maybe that's a question that people should be asking.
Completely agree.
Okay, brilliant. In terms of the question, we were talking about how to implement SAP successfully by planning. And I think what we've done is given some good takeaways. But I think what we've also done is shown the importance of planning through every single stage of the ERP implementation, from thinking about it to, go live, to being in a BAU position where everything is back to normal. And I think we've given some really good insight into that. So, Stephen, you've given us a lot of your time today. Thank you very much, sir. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Mark. All the best.
Thanks.